things about now, you watch Warner, what's he going to do now? Or you watch, Steve Smith or something like that. And he knows about sport, and so you can have good conversations. Then I've got tons of other mates that I'd hate to watch a game with because they've got no idea about it and they come out with silly things.
Yeah, that'd be a bit dire. Now, an interesting little poll from Dunedin. Dunedin's $8 million cycleway on the city's one-way system has the support of the university, the Automobile Association, and, of course, cyclists. But a poll in the Otago Daily Times shows residents are overwhelmingly opposed. Don't know how scientific the poll was, but the opinion expressed was reasonably emphatic. A couple of questions. Are we doing cycleways properly, do you think?
Oh, I don't cycle. I run a lot. I used to, but I don't cycle. So I don't,
see them, though?
I don't know, Jim.
All right. You're not a driver either. Just question.
Clay gets slammed on the panel by Jim Mora.
Savaging at 3 minutes to 5. All right, no, I take your point. You don't really pay attention.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, what should they? I'll ask you. What is a good cycleway supposed to have? I'm not sure.
I suppose it's supposed to have convienience for both and safety, especially for the cyclists.
Oh, you mean the ones beside our roads?
Yeah, the ones beside our roads.
Yeah, I've noticed in Auckland they've got ones going across the main intersection of Nelson Street and Victoria and stuff.
It's
like
very
that.
Inventive in Auckland.
Yeah, I do applaud anything that gets people out of cars and doing something physical and travelling in a different way. So if that's what we're doing, I don't know.
All right. Do you see that happening, Barry? Do you see many people riding on them?
No, and the pressure groups for cyclists are the strongest pressure groups in the country. When I was on council here, Spokes, the local one here, they were on us all the time.
Why
and
is
the
that?
thing that always, I don't know, they just have this demand that we are perfect, we're cycling, we're out of the cars, we're not causing pollution, therefore we should have a road to anywhere we want to go. And if you sometimes said, look, we can't afford to put on this road, but we'll put you on the next road next to it. No, we've got to go on that road. And, really they just demand a wee bit too much. I think that, and that's why quite a few people get upset about it when they lose all this car parking around and they see the cyclists not really going on the cycle lanes that are there for them.
Well, I'm in an area in Northcote Point where they're talking about taking the cycleway over the Harbour Bridge or underneath the Harbour Bridge, and they were talking about taking away parks up and down the main street of Northcote Point.
Yeah.
And a lot of vehement opposition to that. And we think, why don't you just cycle safely on the road? I don't know why you need to. It's not that busy a road.
The lack of car parking or the reduction in car parks is the big issue.
Well, in an old suburb where a lot of people don't even have a carport. There's no car space. They have to park out front of the street.
But I mean, Barry, are these just teething troubles? Will there be a critical mass of uptake? Because
No, I believe a lot of and this is controversial, and I'm saying it tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of cyclists are just pain in the asses. I mean, you see how many of them go through red lights, they weave in and weave out, and they always blame the thing. If there's an accident, it's always motorist hit cyclist, whereas I've seen ones where it's actually the cyclist that's hit the motorist. But you can't really, poor old cyclist. I think what we've got to do is start licensing them, and things might change. Oh, that's caused a controversy, isn't it?
Do we need to talk, Barry? Are you okay?
We've got no more time to talk, but I'd like to thank you both for appearing on the panel.
A pleasure.
Andrew Clay, Barry Corbett.
Always good to see you.
Have a nice weekend, both of you, and a long one in your case, Andrew, as all the traffic struggles to leave Auckland. Thank you for your company this week, everyone. We're back next week, and Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Mexico won't meet US President Donald Trump, the Mexican president, or pay for his wall. And a previous Mexican president is stating that in quite explicit terms. A Christchurch man wins his court battle against Tower Insurance. He tells us why 6 years after the earthquakes, the fight still isn't over. Nikki Kay on being diagnosed with breast cancer, fighting it, recovering from it and going back to work. Wellington Mayor Justin Lester on his lucky escape from a car accident this afternoon, and breakers forward Akeel Mitchell on the moment his eyeball popped out of its socket during last night's game against the Cairns Taipans. Remarkable, plus warnings of a housing crisis on the Kapiti Coast and of a drought in Northland. It's Friday nights. Big old checkpoint ahead after the Pips and Katrina.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Finance Minister is warning heavily indebted borrowers to prepare for higher interest rates. The benchmark cost of borrowing is at an historic low of 1.75%, but Stephen Joyce says it won't last forever. Some fixed-rate mortgage costs have already gone up. Mr Joyce says people need to ensure they can cope with higher interest bills.
People buying houses should be aware that even though they're very low, these interest rates at the moment, that makes the mortgage look more affordable. Don't think of your mortgage now, think of your mortgage in 5 years' time. And it's something that I will be talking about as Finance Minister a lot this year, because I want people to be aware of the potential risks of paying too much.
Stephen Joyce says the number of houses being built, particularly in Auckland, is rising to satisfy demand, and that's another reason why people should be careful about what they pay for a property. The Race Relations Commissioner says online hate speech is on the rise and something needs to be done to curb it. Susan Devoy spoke today at a Holocaust memorial service at Makara Cemetery near Wellington on the 72nd anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau. She said hate speech and racism start out as something small and cannot be left to become normal. Dame Susan said hate speech legislation has not been reviewed for a long time and it's time to update it, taking online media into account.
We've certainly seen a rise and an increase of hate speech in New Zealand, and unfortunately if you speak to many of the people here, the Jewish and members of the Jewish community, they will tell you that they have noticed a rise in hate speech, particularly online, and it's really concerning.
Dame Susan Devoy. Wellington's mayor was involved in a road crash on the way back from the Makara service. Justin Nestor was driving back to Wellington with a colleague when a truck coming downhill towards them hit the side of a rock wall. He says the driver overcorrected and smashed into them. Mr Lester says the airbags deployed and he, his colleague and the truck driver are fine, but the electric car is a write-off. The Mayor of Kapiti Coast says the area faces a housing crisis as prices soar and the market shrinks. Real estate agents say the new motorway extension from Wellington has created unprecedented buyer demand and a chronic shortage of houses for sale. The Mayor, Kay Guranathan, says he was called just after Christmas to help a young family of 6 living in a leaking garage, and he's hearing of other problems caused by rising rents and property prices.
There's no excuse for children to be in that kind of situation in a country with the wealth that is New Zealand. We are a developed country. Children shouldn't be raised in those sort of situations. That is a point of reference for me.
Kay Guranathan has called an urgent meeting of developers, social housing providers and welfare groups on February the 8th. Another prolonged period of hot, dry weather is beginning to take its toll on Northland farmers. Federated Farmers Northland President John Blackwell says while there was a welcome outburst of rain last week, strong winds have whisked away most of the moisture. A state of drought has not yet been officially declared, but Mr Blackwell says the situation is being monitored by authorities. He says if the dry weather persists for the next couple of weeks, farmers could be in trouble.
If it goes on for 2 more months, it becomes a very serious issue. At this point, measures have been taken. There is support for farmers out there if they need a bit of moral support. The Rural Support Trust does a great job of that. I think farmers need to keep an eye on their neighbours, make sure there's no, we don't want to see farmers that are completely stressed out and left on their own. John Blackwell of Federated Farmers. A Tauranga teenager filmed riding a luge on the road across the Kaimai Ranges has been fined $750. The video was posted on Tuesday by 18-year-old Travis Scott after he'd gone down the dangerous stretch of road as a dare. At the time, the police said what he did wasn't illegal. However, after interviewing him, they've fined him for operating a vehicle in a manner likely to cause injury and for driving on the wrong side of no passing lines. Senior Sergeant Ian Campion says the ride could easily have ended in tragedy. It's 5:05. To sport, the New Zealand Breakers player Akil Mitchell says the fact he isn't blind today is a miracle. Mitchell's right eyeball popped out of its socket when he was poked in the eye during the Breakers' loss to Cairns at the North Shore Event Centre last night. He says he could see out of the eye the entire time.
My eye was out of my head, so it was, it was a little painful. Scale of 1 to 10, I don't know if it was the most painful thing I've ever felt, but it was just weird. It's just a weird sensation. It's a weird feeling. Today, I really just feel like I got punched in the face. You know, it's pretty bruised and scratched. But yeah, I could still see, I could still move it. Never lost vision, never went blurry, thank God.
Akil Mitchell says he hasn't watched the footage of the injury and doubts he ever will want to. The Australian cricket captain Steve Smith has been ruled out of the Chapel Hadley one-day series because of an ankle injury suffered during yesterday's one-day win over Pakistan. Wicketkeeper Matthew Wade is now likely to captain the side. They're already without big hitting opening batsman David Warner, who's being rested for the three-match series starting in Auckland on Monday. Manchester United are into the League Cup final against Southampton next month, despite losing 2-1 to Hull City in the second leg of their semi-final. They go through 3-2 on aggregate. And the New Zealand para skier Corey Peters has won his second silver medal at the World Champs in Italy, this time in the Super G. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, environmentalism is out of control and US President Donald Trump is reining it in. We'll take a look at what his plans mean. House prices are out of control. Maria Slade has a book full of advice for wannabe homeowners. You could email us any burning questions you have if you like. And we'll have some live klezmer music with a touring quartet. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Mainly fine, but areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy periods today with drizzle about the Tararua Range, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges today. Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated showers south of Christchurch this afternoon. Buller and Westland, showers becoming isolated this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some heavy with hail, clearing this evening, fine tomorrow apart from some morning cloud. Fiordland, showers becoming isolated this afternoon, mostly cloudy tomorrow with drizzle about the fjords. And the Chatham Islands, a few showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
You are. Thank you so much, Katrina. Welcome, everyone. If you're leaving Auckland tonight for an anniversary weekend getaway, or if you actually just have to drive south routinely, you won't be getting anywhere fast as traffic is choking the southern motorway, we're told. Cars are bumper to bumper from Newmarket to Takanini, which is a long way south. We'll talk to NZTA for the latest shortly. If you are stuck in traffic in Auckland or anywhere, we'd love to hear from you, or your passenger. If you're driving, you can text us on 2101. Also tonight, Nikki Kay diagnosed with breast cancer in September, now back at work and rearing to go. The extraordinary story of Akil Mitchell's eye and what happens when your insurer doesn't behave in good faith. Don't forget, we're broadcasting live on Facebook if you want to watch us, and we're also, of course, on Freeview Channel 50 and the Radio New Zealand website. Let's begin with another dizzying day in Washington, dominated by Donald Trump's threats of a trade war with Mexico after the Mexican president cancelled his visit to Washington next week. Mexico is refusing, of course, to pay for the wall that Donald Trump wants built along America's southern border. But President Trump says one way or another the Mexicans will pay for the barrier's construction, even if the US has to levy a 20% tax on imports from Mexico. This is increasingly the new president's modus operandi, backing his friends, picking noisy fights with those he doesn't regard so warmly. On top of that, a White House advisor to the president called the news media the opposition party in the US. And the British Prime Minister Theresa May has carefully stepped into the whirlwind torture very much on the agenda there. Our Washington correspondent Simon Marks has been looking at another incredible day.
6 days into President Trump's administration and the US suddenly finds itself on the skids with Mexico. 24 hours after the president signed executive orders to kickstart the construction of the wall he wants to build.
A nation without borders is not a nation.
The Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, said he won't travel next week to Washington for scheduled Oval Office talks. The US president, speaking to Republican members of Congress gathered at a retreat in Philadelphia, tried to portray the whole thing as a mutual decision.
The president of Mexico and myself have agreed to cancel our planned meeting scheduled for next week. Unless Mexico is going to treat the United States fairly, with respect, such a meeting would be fruitless.
But that may prove to be one of the alternative facts in which this White House likes to traffic, just like the suggestion, widely shared with reporters, that the president planned to impose a 20% tariff on imports from Mexico, a construct that White House spokesman Sean Spicer indicated would satisfy President Trump's promise to get Mexico to pay for the wall.
By doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall just through that mechanism alone.
But as analyst after analyst pointed out that a 20% tax would simply lead the Mexicans to raise their prices, it dawned on the White House that it would be American customers who buy Mexican avocados, limes, tequila, and automotive parts who would in reality end up paying for the wall. So now the White House says it was just floating the idea. It is not, apparently, US policy. In other news, Donald Trump's top advisor, presidential counselor Stephen Bannon, gave an inflammatory interview to the New York Times. He called the news media the opposition party in America, and despite the First Amendment to the US Constitution that guarantees the right to free speech, he decreed that reporters should keep their mouths shut. That led CNN anchor Jake Tapper to bring this news flash to the network's viewers.
A reminder that the president's top aide just told the New York Times that the press should keep its mouth shut. No.
Into this whirlwind, the British Prime Minister Theresa May has flown. On Friday morning, she will become the first foreign leader to meet Donald Trump in the White House and then hold a joint news conference with him. She wants him to prioritise a bilateral trade deal between the US and a UK poised to leave the European Union. The good news for her, he's willing to do it. The bad news, well, he delivered that himself to Republicans in Philadelphia.
There'll be one-on-one deals. And if that particular country doesn't treat us fairly, we send them a 30-day termination, notice of termination. And then they'll come and say, please don't do that, and we'll negotiate a better deal during that 30-day period. The other way, you can't get out of it. It's like quicksand.
Given the pace of events here, it is a brave foreign leader who agrees to meet President Trump, especially in light of a TV interview in which he expressed admiration for torture and reports circulating that suggest the White House is now preparing to lift sanctions against Russia. For Mrs. May and other governments interacting with the Trump administration, there is the potential for reward, but there is also substantial risk as well. For Checkpoint, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.
One man who's not mincing his words over Donald Trump or his wall is Mexico's former president, Vicente Fox.
I have said and I have told Donald that Mexico will never pay for that wall. And now I have to repeat it to this guy, Sean Spicer, which is going exactly the same line. He again repeated this morning that Mexico is going to pay. They better understand that we are not paying for that wall, that U.S. taxpayers will pay for that wall.
Mr. Fox has been an outspoken and, as you heard, sometimes profane critic of America's new president and his plans to build that border wall, trolling Donald Trump every day on Twitter. In fact, it has been a troll fest on Twitter. Meanwhile, as all of this happens, the Dow Jones has risen and risen, passing the 20,000 mark. Why? Well, it's not that Wall Street backed Donald Trump. Indeed, prior to the election, US markets rose in response to good news for Hillary Clinton. Wall Street was suspicious of Trump at best. Now, well, the Trump bump, as it's being called, isn't all about Donald Trump. As CSBN's Money Watch pointed out, oil prices have risen, interest rates have risen, so that's good news for energy and finance companies and nothing to do with Trump. And corporate earnings were up for 2016. That's got nothing to do with Trump either. Joblessness is down. That happened under Obama. But Trump is also saying if you sell it here, you better make it here. In short, he's noisily backing local and he's pressing for a lower corporate tax rate. Wall Street likes that. And according to Gerald Celente, the founder and director of the Trends Research Institute, as he did with his constituents during the campaign, Donald Trump is now saying exactly what the markets want to hear.
That's all this is. It's a reality show. And now you have a reality show champion that's the President of the United States. Shakespeare couldn't have made this one up.
No.
And then when you look at the reality of what's going on, never before in modern history in America have we had the candidates from each party with such high negativity ratings, both of them in the 60 percentile negative going into the elections. So this wasn't the lesser of two evils. This is all it is. And then you see the numbers. You know, people, for example, people complain. They say that, angry white men voted for Trump. That's not true. Trump got as many white male votes as Mitt Romney did in 2012. Again, going back to not liking the people, it was really that Hillary Clinton received 2 million fewer votes from women than Obama did in 2012. So what we have here, neither of these two candidates were popular among the people.
And America and the world, because we are talking about it constantly in New Zealand and we're about as far away as you can get, has Trump as president. And if you look at what's happening, there's shock, horror, hands being thrown in the air, people saying the end of the world is nigh, and the markets rocketing up to new levels. Why?
That's a very good question. Okay, let's go back to the facts. And here are the facts. Wall Street was very pro-Clinton. And I'm not saying that only because of the money lines and, them getting paid $300,000 to give an hour talk to the Goldman Sachs gang, as WikiLeaks showed us. But they also believed that she would be better for the stock market. So prior to the election, as Hillary Clinton rose and fell in the polls, so too with the equity markets. Now we're going to go back to the weekend before Election Day being on Tuesday.
Yep.
The weekend before Election Day, the FBI announces that they're not going to further examine Hillary Clinton's violation of any laws, and it was a closed case. That Monday, the stock market closed at 371-point gain on the expectation that Hillary Clinton was going to win. The next day was Election Day. That evening, when it looked like Trump was going to win, the Dow futures were down 800 points. Gold spiked over $50 an ounce. And then the next day, everything reversed itself. How come? And we reversed our forecast as well when we saw this happening. And that is because you have a businessman in office and you listen to what he says he's going to do. He's going to lower corporate taxes. That is good for Wall Street. That brings more. Again, whether or not you agree or disagree with these, we're political atheists. We call things the way they are, not the way we want to see them. But we see what's going on. Then he says, I'm going to deregulate forget about these regulations. He just came, 75% of the regulations, we're going to do away with them. That's good for business. Again, maybe not good for the people, but good for business. And I'm going to spend money building the infrastructure. And I'm going to put more trade tariffs on, and I'm going to build business more for America. That's why you have the markets going up. We have a market rise that, again, the trend is your friend. From Election Day to New Year's Day, the stock market had its biggest spike since Dwight D. Eisenhower got elected in 1952. By the end of December, small business confidence in America hit its highest level, its highest spike since Ronald Reagan got elected in 1980. Now you go back to 1979, what was going on? We had stagflation. We had the Iran hostage crisis. So, again, the trend is your friend. Consumer confidence in America in December hit its highest point since 2009 when Obama got elected, and there was all that great belief in hope and change you could believe in. So there's an optimistic point on the business angle, and that's why you're seeing the market spike. So, for example, here in the States, all of a sudden you're hearing that huge Taiwanese company, Foxconn, saying they're going to invest $10 billion here. And again, going back to the markets, that's positive when you read that. When you hear Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors saying we're going to make more automobiles here, that's positive for the markets. So, again, it has a psychological effect. On the other end, is this guy a loose cannon? Of course he is. What you see is what you get. But, again, it's the presidential reality show. It's show business for ugly people. That's what politics is.
Gerald Salento talking to us earlier this afternoon. 5:20, you're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, Auckland Central MP Nikki Kay speaks about returning to work and her recovery from breast cancer. And Akil Mitchell says he plans to be back for the Breakers as soon as he can after his eye popped out of its socket. Extraordinary stuff. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Aucklanders heading south for anniversary weekend are going nowhere fast, we are told. Cars have been bumper to bumper between Newmarket and Takanini on State Highway 1. Takanini, for those of you who don't know, is a long way south. Wayne Sharplin from NZTA joins us now with the latest. Hi Wayne, how's it going?
Hi John. Well, it actually seems to have improved a little bit, especially back around Newmarket Green Lane area, although people who have been sitting in the queues of traffic down there probably don't think so at the moment. It is fairly heavy in patches between Green Lane and Takanini, and it will take a bit of time to get down there.
Yeah, the patience is the key, isn't it? And listening to a good radio station when you're in the car. What about heading north, if people are heading up to Northland for the weekend?
Yeah, well, at the moment there's quite a bit of queuing, especially between Albany and Silverdale. It's quite a slow journey between Albany and Silverdale. After that, it's not too bad through to Puhoi, and heading north into Warkworth is actually starting to ease a little bit at the moment. But once you get up to Wellsford again, it slows down. There's queues heading along State Highway 1 into Wellsford. So State Highway 16 can obviously be used as an alternative route north.
Right, yeah, okay, that's the back route. Yeah, that, boy, getting up to Wellsford can be slow work during the holidays, can't it? Any holiday weekend.
Exactly, it sure can.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. We really appreciate it. We might come back to you a bit later on. So things are slowly improving. Heading out of Auckland, we head to Christchurch now, and the High Court victory of a tower insurance policyholder who successfully sued his insurer for not rebuilding his earthquake-damaged home and for withholding from him the fact they had a document saying it should be rebuilt. Now, the High Court ruled in Greg Young's favour last month, saying Tower's behaviour was a serious breach of the obligation of good faith. Victory for the Christchurch family after 6 long years, and life could go on, except it hasn't. And as you'll hear, Greg Young is still fighting with Tower. But first, some background, starting with the reasons the Young family continued their action against their insurer Tower for so very long.
The first was that we really were forced into the situation, and their offer to us was around $360,000 to repair the house, which wouldn't have gone anywhere near to doing anything. And so we effectively had no choice. And the other was I couldn't believe that they would just continually refuse to acknowledge the actual damage. And how they were getting professionals to ignore the damage as well. So on one level, there was the fact that what they'd offered wouldn't actually fix anything, so we had to dig our toes in. And two, we needed to get people to actually tell the truth.
And what you didn't know, I think, for a very long time was that, because there's lots of kind of he says, she says interpretations of damage in Christchurch, inevitably after earthquakes of that size. But in fact, Tower had a document telling them how bad the damage actually was and that it was a rebuild.
Yeah, they did. And that's quite astonishing. They kept a number of documents from us. There was the one that they had from day one, June 2011, saying that the house couldn't be repaired. And ironically, I talked to the construction expert that came through the house, and he said, "Look, watch this space. They'll send someone through in a couple of weeks who'll say that it's fine." And they did. And then his reports, I didn't know it existed. It disappeared off the face of the earth.
So wait a sec. Sorry, he predicted exactly what happened.
Yeah, he did.
So he went through, wrote a report that you didn't see that said it was a rebuild, and he told you that the insurer would respond by saying it wasn't a rebuild.
Yes, he did.
A serious breach of the defendant's obligation of good faith, said High Court Judge David Gendel, talking about Tower.
Yes, yeah, and the thing with that judgment as well is that there was more to it that Justice Gendel didn't write about. It wasn't just the one report that they had from us. We had a Privacy Act request put in for all documents, and they had another report from us through that as well.
Sorry, forgive me, because under the terms of the Privacy Act, and I'm sure everyone listening knows this, you are entitled to material that's about you. Yes. And they withheld material that was about you that directly and explicitly said your house was a rebuild?
No, the one that they held through the Privacy Act request was a geotechnical engineer's report that supported my geotech engineer's report. So it wasn't about what was the house being a rebuild. It was about what needed to be done to the land. But yeah, they withheld that one.
Which had a direct bearing, of course, on the cost, right?
It did, yes, yeah, absolutely.
So when you discovered all this stuff, and I suspect there must have been some part of you that had a lingering sense, an ongoing sense, that this material might exist, when you discovered it all, and when you won hands down in the High Court, I mean, Justice Gendell's decision is absolutely unequivocal. What was your take on it all?
On one hand, I suppose it was great in the fact that I felt justified. On the other, it kind of made me angry in the fact that we should never have had to go to court. I mean, it was so obvious right from day one that I couldn't believe that we actually had to go through it all. So, yeah, mixed emotions. Moments
because this
of joy and rage.
This wasn't just 2011 damage, this was 2010 damage too, right? So, in fact, this has been 6 years of your life.
Yeah, it has, yeah.
And from very early on in that 6-year period, Tower had a document telling them it was a rebuild.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, no, just mind-blowing that we had to go through it. I mean, the damage is really obvious. You get to the front door and there's a gap that goes across the floor and up each wall beside you that shows where the house has moved. So it's blatantly obvious. But, yeah.
Have you got your money? Has it been sorted?
No. Yeah, the games continue.
Sorry, what other games? I mean, good God, how many games can there be?
They have chosen not to pay the full replacement, but to pay market value, which will be a figure that's probably quite dramatically less, or we can rebuild and ask them for money as required, or we can buy another property. And we found out yesterday that we thought, we'll just buy another property and that'll be the end of it. But we found out yesterday that they'll only pay the price of the house on the property.
Not the land.
And we've got to pay for the land. So defies belief, really, doesn't it?
So what are you going to do?
We are trying to find a house now that the house value matches the figure, and we're going to have to pay for the land.
And will you be able to stay in Christchurch? Will you have to move out of town?
No, we'll stay in Christchurch. There is a small pool of houses like that, and there's also, we've got limited funds. We can't just go out there and get another mortgage if it's too high, as we've still got a mortgage on this property. So there's only so far we can go.
What, you've still got a mortgage on the property that the dispute with Tower was over?
Yeah, we do.
This is starting to sound like a sick joke. It's starting to sound like a sick joke, isn't it?
You just have to have so much money to fight them. That's what I've found. Just ridiculous.
We'll try and get Tower, of course, and I'm hoping, because we're pre-recording this interview, I'm hoping that the person from Tower is listening as they wait to talk to us. What would you say to them?
I'd say, please let us move on with our lives. It's not just me that they're fighting, it's affecting my family. I mean, we had big issues through the court and through Tower ignoring the damage that was being done to my son emotionally. Please just pay us out and let us move on.
That's Greg Young talking to us earlier. Tower Insurance declined to speak with us today. We really did hope they would front to discuss that one, given that it's been through the High Court. It says it's meeting its commitments in respect to both the court judgment and Mr Young's policy. Now, if you have experienced a similar situation where you believe your insurer might have withheld crucial information from you that has a bearing on the payout you're entitled to, we would really love to hear from you. The details are online. You know them. checkpoint@radionz.co.nz is the email address, which is probably the best way to approach us on this one. Let's turn to some sport now, and this extraordinary situation where breakers forward Akil Mitchell, his eye popped out of his socket. Recovery is nothing short of a miracle, really. It's already back in and working exactly as it did before. Fans and fellow teammates were shocked when Mitchell was poked in the eye early in the fourth quarter. Here's how Sky TV called it.
And no ref saw it. We need medical right now.
And no ref saw it.
His eyeball has popped out of his socket.
Oh my God.
That is horrific.
Yeah, it sure looked horrific, and I suspect for Akil Mitchell it was. The game stopped for 5 minutes whilst Mitchell was rushed to hospital, but today he fronted at a media conference sporting glasses and a slight headache, but grateful for the medical assistance he received both courtside and at Auckland Hospital. He then described how the incident unfolded.
I don't remember if the whistle went or if it was kind of after a play, but just trying to tip the ball and two guys went after it, and I think it was Nana's finger that kind of I felt go in my eye, and I don't know. Initially, it just felt like I got poked in the eye, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a bad one." And then kind of fell to the ground and kind of felt my eye out of socket, and that's when I think I started freaking out a little bit. And but like I said, everyone did such a great job of coming over and giving me support, and Mike Rosenfeld did a great job of stepping in and saying this is what you need to do. This is relax. And I don't know if I was in shock or if I was just relaxed, but I started joking around while I was on the floor. And I figured I'd be okay from there.
Akil, it was scary and painful to watch. How painful was it for you?
I mean, my eye was out of my head, so it was it was a little painful. Scale of 1 to 10, I don't know if it was the most painful thing I've ever felt, but it was just weird. It's just a weird sensation. It's a weird feeling. But today I really just feel like I got punched in the face. It's pretty bruised and scratched, but I don't think there's anything serious.
It's called global luxation. Had you ever heard of that before? Have you come across this before? Have you had it in your career before?
No, I've never had my eye knocked out before, so that's good. Right or left, but no, that's a pretty cool term. I haven't even heard it since last night, so you're on your Google. That's nice.
Akil, could you even, when you said that you were more freaked out when you felt it? I mean, could you see? I mean, what were your senses like?
Yeah, that was probably the weirdest part, because like I said, I felt like I just got poked in the eye, so I opened my eye and I'm looking up and I can see everything. My eye's still moving, but it's kind of out here, it feels like. And so I touched it and I immediately wanted to push it back in, and I was like, that's a bad idea. But yeah, I could still see, I could still move it. Never lost vision, never went blurry, thank God, and it's still much better today.
Akil, what have the specialists told you about, obviously including that, about first of all your recovery, and then obviously your ability to play, and then the need to wear eyewear?
Yeah, so they've been pretty nonchalant about it. Last night, I don't think, in the hospital, I don't think the specialist on call, I don't think he believed me. He was asking to see video, just because at this point it had already kind of gone back in, and he didn't see any damage, and I think he was just trying to, validate that it had actually come out of place. And everybody there was like, yeah, it came out, but I don't think he quite believed me. But all the specialists that I've seen so far have said, it looks good. They don't see any damage. And as far as returning, I'm not sure how long it'll take. I know I have another follow-up in a few days, and just try to take it slow from there.
I mean, Tristram told us, but can you tell us what did the specialist say happened? What was the actual diagnosis? What happened?
I don't know. They just said it kind of came out. They said a bunch of fancy words and a couple more big ones, and then a few more that I just didn't understand, and I was like, cool, we're good to go.
and how about right now? Any residual pain or visual,
A bit of a headache, nothing serious. Like I said, I've been up and about it all day, waiting in waiting rooms and talking to doctors and stuff, but I can see just fine. Vision's just fine. 10, you got all 10 up. We're good. So still blink, and like I said, even last night, just leaving the hospital, everything felt pretty normal.
The team played on. Are you happy with that decision last night?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not happy with the way it ended. I really wish they would have won, and they'll hear about it for sure. But I need to stop for me. Injury's part of the game, and it happens. And if one of them were to go down, I'd want to win for them.
Akil, we have all seen it. Well, some of us have. It's pretty freaky stuff. Have you seen it yet?
I can't watch the actual injury. I've seen myself, kind of rolling around on the ground, but I've Paul is one of the people who just really wanted me to see it, and I was like, I can't do it. I think it's too soon. It kind of makes my eye throb a little bit, like thinking about it. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to watch it, but yeah, I don't know.
Akil Mitchell, whose eye popped out of its socket last night, and as he was sitting there, it was back in there and looking exactly like it always had done. Quite remarkable. The Breakers play again on Sunday in Sydney. Mitchell City hopes to be back on court next week. Very popular player, by the way. And we'll hear more about last night's game and the team's hopes for the playoffs from manager Dylan Boucher after 6. 5:35.5. Katrina Batten, it's late even by our standards.
Really it is.
Here's the 5:30 headlines.
The Finance Minister is warning home buyers to prepare for higher interest rates. Stephen Joyce says the benchmark cost of borrowing is at an historic low, but it won't last forever. He says borrowers need to make sure they can cope with higher interest costs. The Race Relations Commissioner says online hate speech is increasing and needs to be curbed. Speaking today at a Holocaust memorial service in Wellington, Dame Susan Devoy says it's time to update hate speech legislation, taking online media into account. Wellington's Mayor Justin Lester was involved in a road crash on the way back from the memorial service. Mr Lester says a truck overcorrected after hitting the side of a rock wall and smashed into his car. He, his colleague and the truck driver are all fine, but the car is a write-off. The Mayor of Kapiti Coast says the area is facing a housing crisis as prices soar and the market shrinks. Real estate agents say the new expressway from Wellington has created unprecedented buyer demand and a chronic shortage of houses for sale. The Mayor, Kay Gurunathan, says he's called an urgent meeting of developers, social housing providers and welfare groups to discuss the problem of rising rents and property prices. Mexico has reacted sharply to President Trump's suggestion that the United States could impose a 20% tax on imports to pay for a planned border wall. The Mexican foreign minister says any tax would harm America and his country won't pay for the barrier. Another prolonged period of hot, dry weather is starting to take a toll on Northland farmers. A state of drought hasn't been yet declared for the region, but Federated Farmers Northland says dairy farmers are trying to source extra feed and looking at culling cows. Traffic continues to be heavy heading out of Auckland this afternoon as people travel to their long weekend destination. It's also Nelson's anniversary weekend and police say there have already been attended several crashes in the region today. Take care out there. So those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
She's not very far away, actually. Thanks, Katrina. Coming up, Susan Devoy, Justin Lester and Nikki Kay. But first, Nona Peltier looking at how the week ended and just a little bit on apartments before we do that.
Yeah, well, I was looking at, I've been looking at this Unit Titles Act review that's underway, and this is the rules that govern the properties that are like in apartment buildings and multifamily dwellings, that kind of stuff. And yeah, the government's been reviewing that for a while. There's been a lot of concern about the problems with those body corporate governance rules, so whether it's disclosure, maintenance contracts, the whole thing. And anyway, there was a auction in Auckland just I guess last week, and yeah, no one turned up for it. So this was for an apartment, a couple of apartments that were for sale. No one turned up to bid on them, and so it was cancelled.
So this is certainly at odds with the story that we're hearing constantly about Auckland, right? That okay, so this
It's so. Anyways, I spoke with this fella who's the president of the Auckland Property Investors Association, and he said, he's a seasoned buyer. He owns lots of investment apartments, and he lives in an apartment. And he has it he's figured out how you buy apartments smartly, but it's not that easy. And so if the government's hoping to encourage first-time homeowners to buy apartments, you've got to be a pretty sophisticated buyer to figure out all the ins and outs, whether it's leasehold property, whether earthquake strengthening is required, what kind of body corporate structure you're going to be dealing with, all manner of things. And, leasehold property, what's that rent going to be in the future? It's not an easy thing, and so apartments aren't as popular with first-time homeowners as I guess the government expects them to. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's an interesting piece of the Auckland housing market. So just as a matter of interest, there you go.
Thank you, Nona. How did the week end in the markets?
Well, actually our market ended really steady. So the share market went up a little bit. We finished up 0.3%. That's 21 points to 7,134, which is, reasonable. And Asia also looked a bit better, and that's because of the way that the Dow closed this week. On the currency front, yes, the US dollar is really, it's kind of steady. The New Zealand dollar is also steady against the US at 72.5 cents. A little bit better against the Australian again at 96.2.
Nona Peltier, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Nona, see you Monday. In September of last year, quite out of the blue, as is often the case with cancer diagnosis, of course, Nikki Kay was told she had breast cancer. The Auckland Central MP issued a statement describing the news as devastating, took leave from her ministerial duties and began receiving treatment. That was 4 months ago. And whilst she's been back in Wellington in the past few weeks, she's now fully returning to work. Earlier this afternoon, she joined us in the studio.
I feel really good actually, and I mean I'm walking 40 minutes a day and I'm eating better, so yeah, I feel good.
Did you know anything about breast cancer prior to getting it?
No, not really at all. So I've had a bit of a doctorate in breast cancer since it's all happened, and one of the things I've learnt is there's so many different types, and also just the number of people that have had it.
3,000 a year are diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
3,000 women, about 20 men, but about 3,000 women. And because I'm of an age, you know people who have gone through. I mean, I know people who've gone through it.
Yeah.
I know you. And
Yes.
then one moment you don't have it, and then
Yeah.
the next moment it's
Yeah.
the kind of entirety of everything you're dealing with.
That's right. And look, it is so prevalent. I've had so many women contact me in particular. Like, either they come up to me on the street or they've messaged me.
And what do they say?
I mean, most of them, it's usually quite emotional because I think it brings back feelings, and a lot of them have sort of said, make sure you ease yourself back into it. That's one thing they say. Secondly, make sure you surround yourself with the people that you love the most, because it is going to be, a rough ride for a period. That was pretty early on, but yeah, it's been really humbling as well for people to have poured their heart out. Like, I've heard some incredible stories, and even though I was obviously sick, I had thousands of messages from people. I just made sure that I responded to those people that had, or had cancer or were going through it. Because they were so personal, the messages.
So the people who'd had cancer and had beaten it
Yes.
wanted to tell you could do it, right?
That's right.
And that is, I mean, it sounds corny, but by God, that's helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Because I think, one of the things I've sort of said, I've had people who've literally been diagnosed a few weeks ago and they get in touch, is to be really positive. Because I do think, your mental well-being can have an impact on your health. It means that you end up, being able to get up and go and do some physical exercise. And so it's been inspirational, some of the women that have got in contact with me. It's really helped my journey.
Let's talk about your journey. You're back at work.
Yes.
I bumped into you on Ponsonby Road some months before your diagnosis, and you looked buggered, right?
Yes, yeah.
And I think I probably rudely said, God, you look buggered.
You may have, John.
I'm sorry. But the point is about this job is that the moment you get anywhere near cabinet, you are working 17-hour days, aren't you? And you're often doing it 7 days a week.
Look, it can be pretty huge hours, but the one thing I'd say is I have had a number of discussions with ministers, some of which I think are really organised, and actually they manage their time better than I probably did before. I also think I took on a range of other projects. I got a little bit involved in local body politics.
Yeah,
It didn't turn out so well, but I need to, and one of the things I'm very determined to do is to say no. I'm going to have both Associate Minister of Education, Minister for Youth, and being the MP for Auckland Central. That's enough.
That's enough.
Yeah, I don't need to take on more.
Are you getting better at saying no? Because you were notoriously poor at it, I suspect.
I am.
And the things also that go with being an electorate MP, going along and talking at schools and opening things and all that kind of stuff, are you pulling back on that for a little while?
Look, I'm just getting better at saying no to the stuff that, because I get a range of other invites to come across the country or just do other Auckland things. So I'm definitely doing that. The second thing I'm doing is, I'm starting from a point which is I will have meal breaks. I will actually do my 30 to 40 minutes exercise rather than there's my working day and then if I can have time, I'll do it. And that's a very different philosophy. But, I feel great as a result of just
I'm not just saying this because it's polite and it almost seems required to say this to somebody who's been through cancer, and you never, I suspect, feel fully through it. But you look fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you look like somebody who was ready to be Minister of Education. I'm sorry to segue. That was a crap segue. But your name is on the portfolio. Heke Parata is going. Bill English regards you very highly. You've been associate for 4 years? It's yours, isn't it? That portfolio.
Look, ultimately, it's up to the Prime Minister, and he hasn't made an announcement. I mean, look, I've been very clear. Of course, it would be my dream. I'd love to have it, but until the PM, makes an announcement to say that's going to happen, then who knows what could happen. I mean, I've been in politics too long to know not to count your chickens before they hatch, because there's lots of situations that occur, the PM's resignation, the former PM's resignation, where, you don't predict it and then something else occurs. So,
we've been talking, I don't know, for 5 minutes now, and your eyes are sparkling most at the thought of potentially being the Minister of Education. You love politics, don't you? You love it. I mean, it's not only is it your career, it's a vocation for you. You love...
Well, I love helping people, and I did think very seriously about leaving, and I thought, well, I could do some charitable work, and then I thought, but then I would be the person that would be lobbying, probably, the Minister.
Lobbying your former self.
That's right, and I thought, actually, to have the opportunity to come back in...
Really? Is that really what it's about?
What was that?
Helping people?
Absolutely. I mean, that is, I've when I was younger, I went over and worked in London. I earned more money than I earn now when I was contracting. So it's never been about money for me. It is about people, and I've just felt there is no greater job than politics to be able to make a significant difference. In terms of those big decisions. There are incredible jobs that are grassroots at a community level, but I feel I've worked really hard to get to this point.
And the interesting thing about being Education Minister is if you become Education Minister, sorry, I don't want to count those chickens either, but let's pretend you do, or let's predict you do, you will be working with people who make a difference, thousands of people who make a difference, because we all remember those teachers who made us understand stuff.
But I've been working with them. I mean, that's one thing I'd say. And as Associate Minister, I mean, there's so many young people that I meet, and older people, for which they can say a major turning point in their life, they would have gone a different way if it wasn't for a teacher, if it wasn't for a principal. So, I mean, it is amazing. I say to people, I get paid to go and chat with a whole lot of young people, but also to spend time with some of our greatest educators in New Zealand. And most of them, they work long hours and they work really, really hard, and they love what they do. And that's why I'm back, because I love young people, and I love being involved in education. So I'm delighted that I've got this opportunity.
Okay, when you become Minister, if you become Minister, I'm being a bit cheeky, aren't I? When you become Minister, we'll get you in and we'll talk seriously about the portfolio and what you hope to achieve as Minister as opposed to Associate. But I want to go back about 2 minutes to the point where you said you considered not returning. How long did you seriously consider that for? I guess your health was a material factor, whether it was going to allow you to return. But once you knew you could, did you seriously think about not being a politician again?
Yep. I mean, I thought about a range. I thought about doing nothing for a while, but it's, I love this job, and I love the fact that every day I get to meet so many different people, and I really felt I've got unfinished business. I mean, I've worked for 8 years to be in Cabinet, to be at this point where I'm, whether a Minister for ACC or Minister of Civil Defence, making big decisions, and I felt that whether it's locally in terms of where Auckland is at, but also at a ministerial level, I've got a lot more to contribute. And so, maybe the easier road would have been to say, hey, I'll just have a few years off and then I'll go and do something in a lighter load or whatever. But I think I would have always regretted it. So it's great to be back.
So to people who are listening, if there are 3,000 people a year in New Zealand diagnosed with breast cancer, it stands to reason that there will have been people diagnosed with it today. What do you say to them?
Be strong, be positive, just surround yourself with people that you love. It's okay to cry. In fact, cry lots.
Did you?
Laugh lots, yes. Yeah, I mean, most nights I would cry. I cried for weeks. Yeah, I still cry. Because there's a whole element of emotions and feelings that, you know, I went through. It's that whole mortality thing too. You know, I mean, looking at my nieces and nephews and thinking, will I see their 21st? You know. Anyway, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but it's you sort of you think that way.
I know. I
So,
mean, we're both we're both about to come to the studio.
Yeah.
That's the big stuff. And what are you, 36?
Yes.
Yeah. And at 36, actually, I mean, of course, we all know that we're mortal, but at 36 you forget it.
You do feel pretty, like, I think that is something, and that I was always probably felt invincible. I don't feel invincible now. I, you know, certainly every day I do think about life, and you know, I think I'm much more appreciate the small things. So
Appreciate the small things.
Yep.
So suddenly you notice.
Well, just because it's, you know, just had such a tough time. Every day that's not being poked or prodded or, you know, whatever, is a great day. So I often will be sitting with someone or a mate, you know, like on my deck in Ponsonby, and saying, well, Jesus, the sun is shining. We're having a good laugh. That's awesome.
You just said Jesus on national radio.
No. Okay.
That's
all
good.
All good.
Suddenly none of that stuff matters anymore, right?
Yeah, totally.
One final question. You notice the small things and you sit on your deck in Ponsonby and think, wow, you know, look at that cloud or what, or, you know, but does it make you more singular about the big things? I mean, are you now more set on a career? Are you now thinking, hey?
I'm more focused, I think. Before, I mean, you know, as you talked about, you might get 100 issues across your desk as a politician a week between the local stuff and ministerial. And I think I've had quite a bit of time to think about a few things that I'm pretty passionate about.
Am I looking at a future Prime Minister of New Zealand, voters being willing?
No, you're not. But I certainly want to play more of a leadership role in a few issues in the future. So,
why not PM? You're just being polite because Paul's only just got the job, and
no, I think. Look, I mean, some politicians. I think there are a lot of politicians that always think of themselves that way, but I think I've always prided myself on pushing other people forward if they're better, and I can say to you that I can see some people that I think would be better. I'm not saying if I stayed in politics long term that it would never ever be a possibility, but I think it's highly unlikely. I think I'm really proud of what I've achieved, and I'm really proud of my strengths and capabilities, but both at a family level, at the competency that we've got in the caucus at the moment, I can see layers of people coming through. You know, I'm very keen to continue to contribute, but I don't see myself in that role. And I'm happy with that.
Nikki Kay talking to us in the studio earlier this afternoon. It's 7 minutes to 6. The Race Relations Commissioner wants a review of legislation dealing with hate speech following a rise in what she describes as vile, vitriolic and very threatening language online. Dame Susan Devoy was speaking at a Holocaust memorial at Makara Cemetery in Wellington on the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Our reporter Jacob McSweeney went along.
One of the organisers of today's annual memorial, Inga Wolf, was in Vienna as Hitler marched through and remembers seeing the swastika and being scared. Now the founding director of the Holocaust Centre, many of her aunts, uncles, grandparents and cousins were murdered in concentration camps, and she's concerned humanity hasn't learnt from its dark past.
We're also here to learn the lessons of the Holocaust, and the world today, 70 years on, is not a good place for race relations and refugees and hate speech. It's all growing. It's a very worrying thing. I never thought that in my lifetime I would see it all happen again.
Inga Wolf says it's clear online forums are where the rise in hate speech is happening.
Days before the internet, if someone wanted to publish something bad, they would send it into the newspaper and the editor would say, no, you can't say that, and wouldn't publish it. But nowadays, everyone can say what they like on the internet and they feed off each other.
Dame Susan Devoy is concerned global events such as the election of Donald Trump have given people licence to use abusive language.
Let's face it, I think that what's happening around the rest of the world, particularly in the USA, seems to have given people some legitimacy to be able to say what they like, you know? And I think we need to be very careful that as a country we don't follow the rest of the world.
She says she wants the government to review hate speech legislation to take into account the way people communicate with each other on the internet. Dame Susan says it's obvious when freedom of speech becomes a cover for threatening and harmful language.
I think it's important that people can have opinions and discuss things and we can agree to disagree, but once prejudice and hate enters the conversation, then actually the debate stops. And I just want to see more people calling it out, you know, particularly our leaders and our politicians. In fact, it's up to all of us, we're all responsible, but we need people at the very top to take some leadership in this because many of the people that this is directed at feel powerless to do anything about it.
The ACT Party MP David Seymour says Dame Susan is in over her head and it's not her place to be calling for more regulation of what people can say. He says there are already laws to stop people defaming others or inciting violence.
Those things are already illegal, but anything further is actually censorship, and we should be just as worried about the state starting to decide what is acceptable to say as we should be about people saying nasty things. Media outlets should be particularly worried.
The Executive Director of NetSafe, Martin Cocker, isn't sure hate speech has increased, but notes that it's just more visible on the internet.
Hate speech has moved increasingly online. I mean, the platforms that are available online, social media, blogging, etc., they give people the opportunity to make those comments, those kind of hate speech comments. You know, plenty of people are taking up that opportunity, unfortunately.
Martin Cocker says it is unlikely hate speech will be able to be erased completely, but the government can keep on top of legislation to ensure it is reduced to a minimum. For Checkpoint, Ko Jacob McSweeney, Tēnei.
Meanwhile, Wellington Mayor Justin Lester's counting himself very lucky after he and a colleague were involved in a head-on car accident going up that Makara Road as they were leaving the Holocaust Memorial Dame Susan was talking at.
Joseph Romanos is my Chief of Staff, so we were driving back. Beautiful day, enjoying the sun, and then unfortunately just in front of us a truck lost control and came across the centre line and headed straight towards us. And normally when you've got a truck heading straight towards you and you're in a little electric vehicle, you sort of think the worst and this could be the end of it. But fortunately the truck was travelling quite slowly, and while the impact was significant and the car's a bit of a write-off, we're both fine.
I can't believe you're both fine looking at the photo.
Yeah, surprising too, to be honest. When we got hit, I thought, yeah, that could be the end of it. And then when I was okay, I sort of looked aside to Joseph and I thought the worst, unfortunately. But he was okay, and we're both okay. And it's, aside from being a little bit shaken and a bit ginger, the ribs are a bit sore, we're both fine.
So the truck, you were going up the hill, right, and the truck was coming down the hill towards you, was it?
Yes, the truck was coming down. He had a full load. No, I'm not sure exactly what happened. He sort of described it as losing control. It hit up against either the rock wall or even into the ditch, and overcorrected and lost control and just kept on coming.
And so you saw him coming towards you?
Yes, which isn't the best view in the world.
No. And it looks like, from the photo, the airbags deployed, did they?
Yeah, so they deployed, and I guess that helped with some of the impact, and he tried to back away, and then we're all okay.
And you and Joseph got out of the car and looked at each other and thought, holy S word, I suspect?
Yes, the car had some, I guess it's an electric car, so it's probably, I'm not sure what it was actually, but it looked like smoke coming out of it. So we both jumped out. I jumped out first, and Joseph managed to get out of the vehicle as well, so we're all pretty clear. We're pretty happy to be able to walk away from it.
Justin Lester, the Mayor of Wellington, if we put the photo up online of the car, you see it and you think, wow, walking away from that was a little bit lucky. It's about a minute before 6, lots and lots of texts coming in from traffic, some of it a bit dated now, but Donna at 5:21 texted, we left Te Atatu Peninsula, so that's heading west, at 3:30 and we're almost at the Manurewa off-ramp at 5:21, so it's taken the best of 2 hours. We knew it would be busy, but this is something else. 5:18, just done the trip from the city centre to Drury, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it's a straight run down the southern motorway. It's totally ridiculous. And James and Katie on State Highway 2, we broke free from the traffic, left CBD Auckland at 3 p.m, now just past the Bombays and heading towards a wonderful weekend in Waihi Beach. Also, lots of correspondence about Wellsford and how bad it is. Now, Wellsford is a little town north of Auckland. If you're heading north, you've got to pass through it on State Highway 1, and there is often a bottleneck to the south of it, and people are saying, why isn't that being sorted? Martin Judd has written a long and impassioned, but reasonable email, Martin, we hasten to add, and we will try and answer some of those questions for you over the next few days. Thank you for all your feedback. It's time for a special edition of the Friday Night Pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi o te pō. Good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The government is warning house buyers to be careful about taking on too much debt. The benchmark cost of borrowing is at an historic low of 1.75%, but the Finance Minister, Stephen Joyce, says it won't last forever. Our economics correspondent, Patrick O'Mara, reports.
Households have enjoyed low mortgage rates in recent years, underpinning a booming housing market. But that's set to change. Some analysts are picking the Reserve Bank will start hiking rates later this year. Already, some fixed-rate mortgage costs have gone up. Mr Joyce says home buyers need to make sure they can cope with higher interest bills. He says part of his job as Finance Minister will be to remind them about the risks of paying too much for a property. Mr Joyce says the number of houses being built is gradually rising, particularly in Auckland, and that will slow price growth. This is Patrick O'Mara.
A dairy industry spokesman says he believes the thousands of cows about to be shipped to China will be treated humanely during their voyage. The livestock carrier Awasi Express is owned by a Saudi businessman, Hamoud Al-Khalaf, who's been linked to animal welfare debacles. In 2003, thousands of sheep died on another of his ships in the Middle East, and 2 years ago, hundreds of lambs died on his farm in the Saudi desert after the New Zealand government flew 900 heavily pregnant sheep there. But Federated Farmers Dairy Chairman Andrew Hoggard says the country has a clean record when it comes to exporting cows to China.
We've been doing these shipments regularly to China for over a decade now, and I don't recall any incidences happening beyond what was the norm. You know, if there was an issue with cattle transport, then that would have been brought up, but it hasn't.
Andrew Hoggard of Federated Farmers. Wellington's mayor was involved in a road crash this afternoon on the way back from a Holocaust memorial service at Makara Cemetery, south of Wellington. Justin Nestor was driving to the city with his Chief of Staff, Joseph Romanos, when a truck coming downhill towards them hit the side of a rock wall. He says the driver overcorrected and smashed into them.
When we got hit, I thought, that could be the end of it. And then when I was okay, I sort of looked aside to Joseph, and I thought the worst, unfortunately. But he was okay, and we're both okay. And it's, aside from being a little bit shaken and a bit ginger, the ribs are a bit sore, we're both fine.
Justin Nestor says the electric car is a write-off. Central Otago's mayor says the timeline for rolling out ultra-fast broadband in his district is unacceptable. The Communications Minister, Simon Bridges, announced yesterday that the plan has been extended to 151 additional towns. However, the Central Otago town of Alexandra will not be upgraded until 2020. Roxburgh won't see improvements until 2024, and Ranfurly won't get any upgrade at all. The Mayor, Tim Cadogan, says he has written to Mr Bridges today but does not expect a successful outcome. He says he met with an alternative internet service provider yesterday to look at other options. A former head of the Billabong clothing company has been sentenced to 8 years in prison. Matthew Perrin defrauded Australia's Commonwealth Bank of more than $13 million. The ABC's Matt Watson reports.
When the surfwear business was booming, Matthew Perrin was worth tens of millions of dollars and owned a Gold Coast mansion. But when deals in China went sour in 2008, he secretly forged his ex-wife's signature to secure loans and credit extensions from the Commonwealth Bank. Judge Julie Dick today sentenced the 44-year-old to 8 years jail. He'll be eligible for parole in late 2020. She said he'd shown little remorse and had chosen to blame others rather than accept responsibility. Perrin showed no emotion as the sentence was handed down.
Matt Watson with that report. The Transport Agency says motorway networks north and south of Auckland are expected to be busy until at least 8 this evening. Many roads out of the city are congested as people head away for the long anniversary weekend. The agency's senior travel advisor, Wayne Sharplin, says drivers going north should take State Highway 16 rather than State Highway 1, as there have been queues into Wellsford Township.
It's definitely slow through Wellsford. Warkworth's not queuing back too bad, not as bad as what we've seen at other times or what we saw earlier in the day. But as more people finish work, we're expecting it to be heavy through there.
Wayne Sharplin. It's also Nelson's anniversary weekend, and the police there are urging drivers to be patient. They say they've attended several crashes already in the region today. Senior Sergeant Claire Robertson is urging drivers to allow plenty of time for their journey because, as well as the holiday traffic, the closure of State Highway 1 has diverted large volumes of traffic through alternative roads. It's 6:05. To sport, the Australian cricket captain Steve Smith has been ruled out of the Chapel Hadley one-day series against New Zealand, starting in Auckland on Monday. He says he injured his ankle during yesterday's one-day win over Pakistan.
I wouldn't be fit for the first game, I'd be very unlikely for the second game and possible for the third game, so 7 to 10 days and we've got a lot coming up.
Steve Smith. Wicketkeeper Matthew Wade is now likely to captain the side. Spain's Rafael Nadal is just one win away from his first Grand Slam final against longtime rival Roger Federer in 6 years. The last time was at the French Open in 2011, which Nadal won. Tonight at the Australian Open in Melbourne, Nadal plays Bulgarian 15th seed Grigor Dimitrov, with the winner to play Federer in Sunday's final. While Dimitrov has never won a Grand Slam title, Nadal believes he has the potential to do so.
Everybody thinks that he's a potential major winner, no? He's a player that has an unbelievable talent, unbelievable potential, so it's going to be a very tough match for me. I hope for him too.
Rafael Nadal. 8 years after finishing his National Rugby League career, former Kiwis captain Ruben Wiki will lead the Warriors in next month's Auckland Nines competition. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Kiwi Boom. It's the Kiwi answer to the American counterculture festival Burning Man, currently taking place in Hunterville, where conditions may be a little damp for burning anything. I talk of organiser Hipathy Valentine. Country Life is back in town, and because we're back on air, we've got a sonic tonic dedicated to renewal on Night's Born Again from afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Mainly fine, but areas of cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wellington and Wairarapa. Cloudy periods today with drizzle about the Tararua Range, becoming fine tomorrow morning. Nelson and Marlborough fine, apart from isolated showers about the ranges today. Canterbury, mainly fine, but isolated showers south of Christchurch this afternoon. Bulla and Westland, showers becoming isolated this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, scattered showers, some heavy with hail, clearing this evening, fine tomorrow apart from some morning cloud. Fiordland, showers becoming isolated this afternoon, mostly cloudy tomorrow with drizzle about the fjords. In the Chatham Islands, a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. It's almost 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. You worked right the way through, including Christmas Day, didn't you?
I did.
You got a few days off now.
I have got a few days off now. Very excited.
Well earned and well deserved. Enjoy them.
Thank you very much. I will.
See you the following week. The American President, Donald Trump, has flagged the possibility of a hefty tax on Mexican imports to pay for that border wall, just over 3,000 kilometres long, of course. The proposal is the latest salvo in an escalating war of words between the two countries, less than a week into Mr Trump's presidency. Already the Mexican president has snubbed Donald Trump by cancelling a scheduled meeting in Washington next week. The ABC's Ann Barker reports.
Donald Trump is determined that Mexico will pay for the cost of a border wall, and he thinks he's found a way to do it, whether Mexico wants one or not.
Well, we're working on a tax reform bill that will reduce our trade deficits, increase American exports, and will generate revenue from Mexico that will pay for the wall if we decide to go that route.
Mr Trump says a 20% tax on imports from Mexico could raise around $10 billion a year and pay for the estimated $15 billion cost of building the wall. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer says given the US has a massive trade deficit with Mexico, the tariff would make sense.
If you tax that 50%, $50 billion at 20% of imports, which is, by the way, a practice that 160 other countries do. Right now, our country's policy is to tax exports and let imports flow freely in, which is ridiculous. But by doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall.
This latest war of words is shaping up as a serious diplomatic row between the US and Mexico and comes just hours after Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto cancelled a visit to Washington and, under pressure from Mexicans, put his foot down to Donald Trump.
Lamento y repruebo la decisión de Estados Unidos.
I regret and disapprove of the decision by the United States to continue with the construction of the wall, he said, which has for years, far from uniting us, divided us. Mexico does not believe in walls. I've said time and time again, Mexico will not pay for any wall. Politically, there is some support for a wall inside the US. A survey last week by the American ABC and Washington Post showed 37% of Americans were in favour. But economically, the benefits of a wall and the proposed import tax are questionable. In the short term, a 20% tariff would be paid by US importers and consumers, so Mexico wouldn't pay for the wall at all, though it would suffer a loss of exports if US consumers then switched to cheaper goods. And some commentators predict the wall would more realistically cost up to $40 billion to build, and once finished, it would hurt the US economy.
At the moment, illegal immigrants constitute about 11, 12 million people. 80% of those people work or are looking for work. And so slowing the flow of new illegal immigrants into the United States should slow the growth of GDP.
Gary Burtles, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, says the loss of cheap Mexican labour would damage the US.
Total economy will grow a little more slowly. The incomes of people who compete with illegal immigrants should climb a little faster, and the rest of us will pay higher prices for things like fruits and vegetables, inexpensive motel stays, other things produced by industries where illegal immigrants are an important source of labor.
Other industries, of course, could well benefit from the wall, namely those involved in its construction. And ironically, one of those is the giant cement company Cemex, which is based in Mexico.
That's the ABC's Anne Barker reporting. 6:11 here with Checkpoint on RNZ. Normally, when we say the following words, we're talking about Auckland, but now it's Kapiti Coast, a housing crisis. The Mayor is warning about it. Soaring prices are pushing out low-income families and causing big shortages of homes for elderly people. Real estate agents say the new motorway extension from Wellington has created unprecedented demand from buyers, and there's a chronic shortage of houses for sale. The result, rising rents and a shrinking number of affordable homes on the Kapiti Coast. Here's Sharon Brett-Kelly.
2 days after Christmas, Kapiti Mayor K. Guru Nathan was called to a house where a couple were living in a garage with 4 children.
Eldest was about 4 years old and the youngest was just 3 months. A tiny place. And it was raining on that day and it was leaking.
He says he cried.
There's no excuse for children to be in that kind of situation in a country with the wealth that is New Zealand. You know, we are a developed country. Children shouldn't be raised in those sort of situations. That is a point of reference for me.
With the help of social agencies, a home was found for the family. But Mr. Guru Nathan says he's hearing of others grappling with housing problems caused by rising rents and property prices. Kapiti real estate agent Kaiwan Howard says massive demand, mostly from outside the area, means cheaper houses in the $400,000 to $500,000 bracket are selling for 50% more than their rateable value.
You don't get a lot of bang for your buck now. You know, $400,000, you used to buy something pretty substantial around the Raumati area. Now you're not.
Angie Cairncross bought a house for about $500,000 in Kapiti at the end of last year. She says she was lucky, but the competition was tough.
The real estate agent said, make sure that you have all your finances sorted out before you go, because it's a seller's market and we're getting people coming in from Auckland and Wellington and they're just snapping them up for a lot more than the local residents seem to be able to buy them for.
The head of a new housing task force, Kapiti Coast Councillor David Scott, says the price hikes are segregating the population, the richer people who can afford to live in Kapiti versus poorer people who have to move further north. Kapiti's growing elderly population, he says, are among the hardest hit.
Mr Scott says the number of older people with medical conditions on the council's urgent housing list has grown to 86, but the council hasn't kept pace with the population growth.
We've got over 50,000 residents, so it's a fair size and very large geographical area, and we provide 120 social houses through the council. But we haven't built any for over 35 years.
Mayor Guru Nathan says the problem needs to be addressed before it becomes a crisis. He's called an urgent meeting of developers, social housing providers and welfare groups to work on solutions on February the 8th. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Sharon Brett Kelly aho.
And while we're on the subject of housing affordability, the Finance Minister Stephen Joyce has a warning for mortgage holders and would-be house buyers. He says interest rates are starting to rise and heavily indebted borrowers should be careful.
Interest rates are historic lows, but I think what we're starting to see this year is they won't necessarily stay at historic lows. I've always had that view, incidentally. And I've always felt that people buying houses should be aware that even though they're very low, these interest rates at the moment, that makes the mortgage look more affordable. Don't think of your mortgage now, think of your mortgage in 5 years' time. And that's something that I will be talking about as Finance Minister a lot this year, because I want people to be aware of the potential risks of paying too much.
It's Stephen Joyce. The Australian company about to export thousands of New Zealand cows to China has promised the highest standards of animal welfare will be met during the journey. The livestock carrier, the Awasi Express, owned by the controversial Saudi businessman Hamoud Al-Khalaf, will arrive in Napier next week to collect the animals. Mr Al-Khalaf has been involved in several international animal welfare debacles. In 2003, live sheep exports were banned by the New Zealand government after thousands of sheep died aboard another of his boats in the Middle East. And 2 years ago, hundreds of lambs died at his farm in the Saudi desert, of course, after the New Zealand government flew heavily pregnant sheep there. The Australian livestock exporter Landmark International released a statement this afternoon to RNZ News saying only 4,500 cows will be shipped, while the Awasi Express is capable of carrying 16,000. It says 3 of the company's stockmen will accompany the cows. Federated Farmers Dairy Chairperson Andrew Hoggard told our political reporter Benedict Collins he believes the animals will be properly cared for.
We've been doing these shipments regularly to China for over a decade now, and I don't recall any incidences happening beyond what was the norm on any of these shipments of cows to China. The track history of cattle exports out of New Zealand have been of good standard. Certainly the fact that the only thing people can point to is a shipment of sheep 14 years ago. If there was an issue with cattle transport, then that would have been brought up, but it hasn't. So that tells me that things are in good place.
Landmark International wouldn't discuss its Chinese customer, and its export manager Stephen Reynolds said company policy did not allow him to give interviews. We are going to keep an eye on that story. We're also keeping an eye on traffic. We're hearing from lots of you stuck on State Highway 1 north of Wellington. Here's why. Police and emergency services are in attendance at a crash involving a car and a truck on Old State Highway 1 in Peka Peka. The crash happened shortly before 5:15, just south of the road to Peka Peka Beach. One person has serious injuries, so that's up the Kapiti Coast from Wellington. The road is currently blocked and a diversion is in place for southbound traffic at Peka Peka Road, but lots of people are saying that stretch of State Highway 1 is really, really slow and traffic is backed up. People are, however, working at the scene and it is being cleared, but there is a serious injuries accident there. Police advising motorists to expect delays and avoid the area if possible while the scene is cleared. There's been long delays in both directions heading out of Auckland for the long anniversary weekend. Monday is a holiday. Wayne Sharplin from NZTA is back with us. Thanks for coming back, Wayne. Things have improved somewhat since we spoke an hour ago.
Yeah, they have at the moment down on the southern motorway. Traffic's mainly heavy between Princes Street and Hill Road, kind of eases up a little bit, so moderate through to Takanini southbound. There was a crash on the southeastern arterial route, or southeastern highway as some people know it as, and so there's some queues around the off-ramp there on the southern.
Okay, is this typical Friday traffic or is it worse? This is long weekend traffic, is it?
Well, at the moment, what we're seeing around the actual interchanges close to the CBD is actually probably a little bit lighter than the usual Friday afternoon peak. Everyone seems to have headed off from work a little bit earlier. So out in the fringes a bit, we're seeing that heavier traffic as well. So the other area, I suppose, is up near Wellsford. And particularly, obviously, some people have made it up to there, and we're starting to see those heavy queues.
So
at the moment.
Backed up in Wellsford, as is so often the case. Thanks, Wayne. We really appreciate it. Wayne from NZTA. So, in fact, not bad getting out of Auckland now. We will try and get more on State Highway 1 north of Wellington and find out if that road is being cleared expeditiously. If you're travelling through Northland, it's because you're heading... if you're travelling through Wellsford, it's because you're heading north, and the north has had a dry old summer so far. Extra blankets and raincoats haven't been far from reach in many parts of the country this summer, but farmers in Northland are worried they're in for another prolonged dry spell. While there's been no official drought declaration as yet, authorities are keeping a close eye on the situation, and locals say there's been an upside to the hot, dry weather. It's been perfect for camping, but farming, well, Sarah Robson's been looking at all of this for us.
The Federated Farmers Northland president, John Blackwell, says while there was a welcome burst of rain last week, strong winds have whisked most of the moisture away from the soil. He says dairy farmers are trying to source extra feed and they're looking at culling cows. A lot of sheep and beef farmers have already destocked, while a wet October has meant many crops have failed. A drought hasn't been declared yet, but Mr Blackwell says the Northland Rural Support Trust and the Minister for Primary Industries, Nathan Guy, have been monitoring the situation. Mr Blackwell says if the hot, dry weather continues for another 2 weeks, that could be reassessed.
The last few summers in Northland have been very good summers. We've had good rain, and it's been very productive. A few years before we had a very severe drought. This hasn't quite got that point in my area, which is Dargaville, but there are areas in Northland that say it's worse.
Mr Blackwell says a drought declaration would mean farmers would be able to access help through the Rural Support Trust, their banks and companies like Fonterra. But just how tough things get will depend on how long the hot, dry weather persists.
If it goes on for 2 more months, it becomes a very serious issue. At this point, measures have been taken. There is support for farmers out there if they need a bit of moral support. The Rural Support Trust does a great job of that. I think farmers need to keep an eye on their neighbours, make sure there's no, we don't want to see farmers that are completely stressed out and left on their own.
Lisa Murray from Met Service says there may not be much relief in sight for Northland farmers.
But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good news for the farmers up there. But hopefully, they might see a few weather features in between these ridges of high pressures as we get into that summer pattern. But generally, it is a dry season up there. This is just a particularly dry one.
But Ms Murray says Northland isn't the only region desperately crying out for rain. Gisborne and the Hawke's Bay are also sweltering. There's an upside though. The hot, dry weather has been perfect for camping. Many campgrounds have their own bore supplies, so they're not reliant on rainwater. Bruce Barron and his wife Helen own the Motutara Farm campground at Whananaki North. After last summer's mixed bag weather-wise, Mr Barron says this summer has been much better.
We're full up, right through. We traditionally stay full, obviously weather dependent, but this year's been a cracker for camping. I mean, right through January we've been absolutely crammed, and booked out this weekend, and then it's going to be, the looks though the weather's staying good, so Waitangi weekend will be booked out as well.
But less lucky could be holiday makers planning on heading to a beach over the long weekend. The lack of rain has meant people in popular holiday spots north of Auckland, like Omaha, Lee and Matakana, have been running out of water in their tanks. Water supply companies can't keep up with the heavy demand, and Todd Ansell from Lee Water Supplies says people could be waiting 10 or 15 days for a delivery to top up their tanks.
Definitely getting panic calls, and people that have gone back to Auckland because they can't use their batch because they haven't got any water.
Mr Ansell says people should regularly check the water levels in their tanks and book water deliveries well in advance. For Checkpoint, call Sarah Robson, Aho.
6:23. Breakers forward. Akil Mitchell says he hasn't been able to bring himself to watch the footage of the moment in last night's game when his eyeball popped out of its socket. The 24-year-old went to tip the ball early in the fourth quarter against the Cairns Taipans when he was accidentally poked in the eye, resulting in his left eyeball popping out. The game was stopped for 5 minutes as Mitchell lay courtside with a doctor until an ambulance arrived.
I opened my eye and
I'm looking up and I can see everything. My eye's still moving, but it's kind of out here, it feels like. And so I touched it and I immediately wanted to, push it back in. And I was like, that's a bad idea. But yeah, I could still see, I could still move it. Never lost vision. Never went blurry, thank God. And it's doing much better today.
Akil Mitchell, quite remarkably well and in possession of both eyes in the right places. The Breakers General Manager and former player, of course, Dylan Boucher, is with us. Hi, Dylan. Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, evening, John. How you doing?
Yeah, good. What was it like when that happened?
Oh, I tell you, I must admit, I was probably one of the latter people to the scene, if you like. I assumed he'd just been poked in the eyes on the far side of the court, and I sort of walked around the court to make sure that if there was any blood, it was being mopped up. And as I got closer, the expression on people's faces, I was wondering why people were looking like they were. And a few people had said to me, his eye. And then it wasn't until I got closer that someone said his eyes come right out. And so when I got over to him, I realised the significance of it, and it was horrific. It's something I've never ever seen on a basketball court.
No, and there aren't many people on the planet who've spent longer on a basketball court than you. How many games did you play for the Breakers, Dylan?
Oh, well over 300 in my career.
Exactly, exactly.
A lot of games.
Yeah, and you've never seen anything like this.
Never seen anything like it, and I couldn't believe it when I saw it with my own eyes. I was horrified for him, and I feared for the worst. To be fair, it's a miracle that he was even joking about it at the time, even when it was out, and he was so remarkably calm. It was unbelievable.
He's a very popular new member of the team, Akil, isn't he?
Oh, he's a great guy, and one of the selling points when we were looking to recruit him is, they said he's not a good guy, he's a great guy, and that was solidified us looking at bringing him over here, because we're very much about character when we bring guys in. And a lot of people say, oh, he's a good guy, but when you talk about Akil, you say he's a great guy, and he's certainly been that for us as well.
It's a lovely way to describe him. Can we talk about? I know. I mean, he looked remarkably well. You wouldn't have known if you'd just seen him at that media conference this afternoon. Both eyes in place, working as they should, looking exactly normal. But I wonder, basketball is a contact sport, and there are a lot of hands flying everywhere all the time. Will he be a bit tentative about returning? Are you going to give him a break for a while? You kind of need him, don't you?
Yeah, it's a hard one, and obviously he'll be gauging it. Obviously, we'll be following the specialists and what they have to say and when he should return. But again, it will be hard. It's like any injury. When a guy comes back from an injury, he's always going to be a little bit tentative. And will he need to wear goggles? These are all the things we're trying to find out right now from the specialist, because certainly I know even he's probably not going to want to wear goggles because he's going to catch a lot of flack from his teammates, but for the safety of his eye and probably for his own confidence, it's probably going to be good for him to have something protective over that eye.
Yeah, I want to look forward to the rest of the season, because you've got 3 games before the playoffs, and you want to win them all, right? But Cam, just before we move on, can we talk about Dr. Michael Rosenfeld, who I think has been mentioned with glowing gratitude in dispatches?
He was fantastic last night, and we actually had quite a few people step forward last night wanting to help. We had nurses in the crowd, we had ambulance officers in the crowd. Crystal Russell, who ran our game night last night, her husband Hayden is an ambulance officer, and he came in and helped Mike out. But Mike had everything in advance at the hospital ready to go. So by the time the ambulance got to the hospital, everything was in place.
But he's not an eye man. He's a bones man, isn't he?
Not at all. Yeah. He's our man on the ground. He's our doctor, game day doctor. But no, he's not. He's not an eye specialist.
No. Well, he did the job. By golly,
he did a great job. Absolutely.
You got 3 games left in the normal course of events. You got the Kings in Sydney on Sunday, reminding us once again what an incredible travel schedule you boys have. Then Adelaide next Saturday, and then a home clash against Melbourne I think a few days after that.
10th of February.
Yeah. Okay, so you need to win all 3, really, don't you?
Yeah, well, it's an uphill battle, as it's been probably from about 5 games ago. And, Paulie was pretty clear. He'd put the team into what he called playoff mode, and everything was a must-win from here on in. And although we dropped one last night, and there hasn't been a lot of talk about the loss because of the eye. The insignificance because of the eye, but. Going into these last 3 games, we'll definitely be focused on getting this win on Sunday first, and then focusing after that on Adelaide and then Melbourne to follow.
Yeah, good luck, Dylan. Just before you go, you were offered, very reasonably, I thought, the opportunity to call the game off, and the team collectively decided against it. In hindsight, was that the right decision?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about that after the game, and we truly believe that the team wanted to play on it, and they wanted to do it for a kill. The fact of the matter is, when they did come back to play, they certainly weren't as focused as what they probably thought they would have been, and it obviously was detrimental to the outcome of the game. But I think if they given the opportunity again, I think they would still choose to continue playing the game. Thanks, Dylan. Good luck for the rest of the season, and we look forward to seeing you in the playoffs. Dylan Boucher, who is the Breakers team boss now, having played, as he said, over 300 games, some extraordinary career. That's the end of Checkpoint for tonight. Akil Mitchell's eye came out of his socket, but it was still attached by his optic nerve, and he was able to see all of this unfolding as it unfolded. And today he was sitting there with his eye back in its socket, business as normal. The human body is quite a remarkable thing. And having finished on that note, I like a schoolboy going, wow, look at that. We'll see you Monday at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government is warning house buyers to be careful about taking on too much debt. Police have arrested 12 people today following a gang shooting during a funeral procession in Whakatane earlier this month. A dairy industry spokesman says thousands of cows about to be shipped to China will be treated humanely. Mexico says Americans would wind up paying for President Trump's border wall if he taxes imports because goods would become more expensive. Our next news and weather is at 7.
It's starting to burn.
This week on Music 101, an in-depth interview and stunning live performance from folk futurist Wise Blood. We've got brand new music from Purple Pilgrims and Phaser Days. We preview the lineup for Laneway 2017, and Aldous Harding